Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar update from GotSafety. I am your co-host Rick Roman along with
Michael Crowley.
Michael. So we did this webinar just 3 weeks ago to update everybody on the update to the second readoption to the California ETS.
Yes, Rick, it almost feels like I've done this webinar a few minutes ago. It just feels like it's been so close. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And no more than 6 hours after we came on with this webinar, did we have this update that came across from Industrial Relations making this announcement here. And let me bring up my screen. They have basically made the announcement that they've got an update that we will now be following the CDPH guidelines regarding isolation and quarantine.
Rick, what does the CDPH stand for?
That's the California Department of Public Health.
The California Department of Public Health, Rick, is not Cal OSHA. We're right. We're separating the two, right? They are not Cal OSHA.
They are not.
The Department of Health, the California Department of Health is not Cal OSHA.
That is not Cal OSHA. So OSHA updated its guidelines. The governor had previously stated that OSHA would follow this CDPH, but until we got official word from them, we weren't going to make any kind of announcement. But 6 hours after our webinar, we got this notification here of this Department of Industrial Relations news release that basically said that today OSHA updated its ETS to incorporate the new guidance from the California Department of Health regarding the isolation and quarantine periods. So everything else that we talked about in the previous webinar, which you will have links to with this recording, so you can watch that webinar, get those slides as well as these slides. You'll get all the information that you need there. But everything else that was in that previous webinar is still in play. It's just the stuff as it relates to the quarantine periods. And so basically they said as of when that new ETS took place on January 14th, that these new CDPH recommendations would be followed. So Michael, my first question that I would want you to talk to the folks about here is the fact that now the OSHA regulation, which they have not updated, is telling us the set of regulations that we talked about in the last webinar, but yet on the side, they're basically saying that this is what we're going to recognize. And what are your thoughts on that, number one?
Well, my thoughts are funneled in sheer irritation, Rick. This really is problematic because never in our time have we seen Cal OSHA come out with a regulation that they went through the legislative process to put into play and get this into code in law, and then at the same time come out and say, all that hard work we did, don't worry about it. Just do this other thing. That's kind of a catch-22. Now, our specialty is representing people at the OSHA hearings. We've been doing it 30 years. I've been personally doing it almost 20. And so the reality of it is you look at this, it's like, my gosh, I have never seen this before. So I can tell you on this note, before we start this thing and you start hearing it all, let me just make this clear. I can protect you from OSHA code at a hearing. I write the books to OSHA code. I do our training based on OSHA code. OSHA code is what we're going to do. The hearings are an arbitrational hearing, and the judges make a lot of choices. Now, I love the judges. They're awesome. The district managers and the OSHA inspectors, they're awesome. But at times, they do disagree, okay? They disagree at times, and they will rule in different standards. The judges are pretty uniform. They're pretty awesome. But when it comes to the district managers and the individual inspectors, there's a lot of opinions that take place. Even though I love and respect them, there is a lot of opinions that take place. And my problem here is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when Cal OSHA code says one thing, but they're saying, well, we don't think that? And when we talk to our contacts within the OSHA, the district managers, some inspectors, and then the OSHA legal team, what we find is they're telling me right now they're not sure what they're going to do. Now, the standard, Rick, how long do all these temporary standards go to, Rick?
This all expires on the 14th of April.
So it's all going to blow up in the 14th of April, right? In the middle of April. It would probably be better if it blew up on April Fool's Day. That would be more reasonable on all this, right? But it's popping on the 14th, so there isn't a huge long time. But at the same moment, if we get hit by something in the middle, I'm just interested to see what they're citing for and how they're going to rule it. I don't know, but here we are today, and the good news is we're going to go through this relatively quickly and show you all this. Rick, let's start this out and see if we can get this done, bro.
All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through basically with these CDPH guidelines, what the standards are. And however, as Michael has stated, our recommendation at this point is that we follow the OSHA code. However, based off of this new release here, it says, with one exception to the new isolation and quarantine recommendations from the CDPH will replace the exclusion and return to work criteria for sections 3205, which is the code, which is the regulation that our books are written to. So you will have a conflict with what your code is written as and what OSHA is telling you they're going to recognize.
And remember, I can't write the book, guys out there, to anything but code. You understand what I'm saying? So when you say there's a conflict, Rick, and the way I agree there is a conflict, just know I can't undo the conflict, because I can't write a book to a news release. You see what I'm saying? I can't write your documentation to a crappy news release. That's insane. Okay. All right, Rick.
And we've already updated all of you folks that have documentation with us to the new standard. And so it is written to the 3205. However, we're going to go over these new exclusionary requirements so that you at least know what they are. And then you can make the business decision as to whether you're going to follow these these CDPH guidelines, which may be a little more lenient, or, as Michael said, for just the next couple of months, just stick to the code so you know you're safe. But they've broken this up into 3 tables. There is one additional piece where it says, when an order to isolate, quarantine, or exclude an employee is issued by a local or state health official, the employee shall not return to work until the period of the isolation or quarantine is completed or the order is lifted, even if the order exceeds the specified exclusion requirement in the ETS or the CDPH recommendations. So if you're told by government officials, that you got to follow that. Aside from that, you're going to fall into one of these 3 categories. Table 1, these are requirements for those who test positive, who have to isolate. Category 2, or Table 2, is employees who are exposed and need to quarantine. And then Table 3 would be for employees who are exposed that do not require quarantine. So as we go through these here, Table 1, as I mentioned, these requirements apply to all employees regardless of vaccination status, previous infection, or lack of symptoms. If you are test positive for COVID, you must isolate, and as it says here, they must be excluded from the workplace for at least 5 days. Mm-hmm. The isolation can end, and the employee may return to work if after 5 days, if symptoms are not present or resolving, and a diagnostic specimen collected on day 5 or later are negative. Mm-hmm. Next bit here is, if an employee is unable or chooses not to test and their symptoms are not present or resolving, isolation can end in 10 days. So if you choose not to test, you got to isolate for the full 10 days.
So if an employee at work gets COVID from a work-related infection, and he goes, no, I don't want to test. Rick, you're saying to me that I got to pay him for 10 days instead of 5?
You got to pay him for the time that they're out. If they don't test again, obviously they've already been tested initially. They've found to be positive. They have to be out for at least the 5. But if they don't, they can test again after 5 days. And if they're negative, they can return. If they choose not to or still are positive, they have to stay out for the remainder of 10 days. If an employee, regardless of the test results or the time, if the employee still has fever, they may not return until the fever resolves. So regardless, you cannot come back to work if you have fever.
Well, you better really love and trust employees at this kind of work level. Let me tell you that.
Yes, we've had a lot of folks that, even though we sent out a notification when this came out, that just wanted us to kind of break this down for them. And this is, going through it step by step here. If an employee has symptoms other than fever, they may not return to work until their symptoms are resolving or until after day 10 from their positive test. So if you don't have a fever and you tested negative, but you have other symptoms, maybe you've got a lingering cough, after 10 days, you can still return to work. Next, if you do wind up returning prior to the 10 days, you must wear face coverings for the total of the 10 days. So no matter what, even whether if you're gone for the 10 days or you come back early for the remainder of those days, totaling 10 from that positive test, you must, especially in indoor settings, you must continue to wear face coverings.
Well, I think a lot of the companies are wearing face coverings in the workplace nowadays, Rick. That may not be that big of a deal.
And right now, yes, in California, they're still under the mandate from Governor Newsom to be wearing them. But when that lifts until the middle of April, you'll still have to follow on these guidelines.
Table 2, Rick. Table 2.
Table 2, that would be for employees who are exposed to somebody with COVID that needs to quarantine. So these requirements apply to those who are unvaccinated or are vaccinated and booster eligible. There's a footnote there, which we will be discussing about what booster eligible is, but have not yet received their booster dose. So there's also a stipulation for those. If you're vaccinated but have not gotten your booster and you're booster eligible, there's another criteria. Anyway, so let's say you're in this category here. Again, you have to be excluded for at least 5 days from that close contact. You must test on day 5, and if on day 5 you're negative, you can return to workplace as long as you don't have symptoms and the tests are negative. If an employee is again unable or chooses not to test, they continue to have to quarantine for the full 10 days. And those that get to come back prior to 10 days have to wear the face covering for the remaining of the 10 days from their last exposure. If an exposed employee tests positive, then they would fall back into table 1 and start over with that criteria. If an exposed employee develops symptoms, they must be excluded pending the results of their test. And then, of course, you should be encouraging your employees to get boosted and vaccinated.
Strongly encouraging, right, Rick? The word is strongly encouraging. You got to strongly. I don't even know what that means. You mean you whip them to get them to do it? I mean, hey, get your booster shot. I mean, what do you do?
Well, yep, that's their wording. This isn't our wording.
Well, so since the Supreme Court shut down Biden's ruling on mandating, I guess all we can say is strongly now.
Yes, strongly encouraged. So the first footnote. So when you talked about that category of people who have been vaccinated but are booster eligible, well, what is booster eligible? And this comes. This isn't part of the regulation. This is just letting you know what they consider to be booster eligible here. So basically, if you've had the Pfizer or Moderna 5 months after receiving your second dose, you become booster eligible and you can go get that booster shot. If you've got the single Johnson & Johnson shot, you have to wait at least 2 months after that, and then you can go and get your booster. So any employees you have that fall into this category where they've been exposed, you got to determine has it been 5 months or not, or 2 months or not since their last shot. So are they booster eligible or not? So that are they actually in category 2? So the second footnote to that talked about those folks that have not yet received their booster dose. It says employers are not required to exclude anti-symptomatic employees in this category. So the folks that are, remember, the category 2 was people that are unvaccinated, and then people who are vaccinated but not yet booster because they're booster eligible, right? So in this case here, if somebody falls into the second part of that category, they don't have to be excluded. They can continue to come to work. And as long as within 3 to 5 days after that exposure, they get a negative test, at which point they can continue to come to work. However, if they do come to work, they still got to wear the face coverings for the 10 days. And then, of course, they have to continue to have no symptoms, and they'd be able to come to work and wear their mask. So if they're booster eligible and haven't received it yet, but they have no symptoms, they can still remain at work. But after 3 to 5 days, they got to be tested.
Okay.
And then the last table is table 3. These are folks who are exempt, who are exposed, but do not require quarantine. That would require people who are boosted or are vaccinated, but are not yet booster eligible. So maybe you got your final dose of your vaccine 3 months ago. Well, you're I guess considered fully inoculated. You haven't become qualified to get your booster yet, so you fall into this category 3.
Right. I love it.
And in that case, those employees do not need to quarantine. Again, on day 5, they have to do a test, and if they stay negative, if they're negative, they get to continue to work. They have to wear face coverings for the 10 days after the exposure from the beginning, of course, especially in indoor settings. And then we talked about the face covering requirements in the initial webinar, which you'll have links to with this. And then if employees test positive, of course, they follow back to, if they test positive, they go back to table 1. And if they develop symptoms, they must be excluded pending the results of their tests. So those are the 3 categories that folks may fall into. And then here's a couple of other exclusions. And so what if tests can't be obtained following a close contact? If a company covered by table 2 cannot be tested, quarantine must continue for 10 days, as explained in the table. So if they can't get tested, they're quarantining for 10 days. Tests sometimes are hard to come by lately. If the employees are under table 3 cannot be tested on day 5, they have to follow the ETS, which is not these CDPH guidelines, but the original ETS guidelines, which are wearing a face covering and maintaining 6 feet of social distancing for 14 days following the close contact. So that's all of what the updates are. Those are the new numbers. They're still very confusing in that you'll really need to be looking at these guidelines with each and every case. But Michael, just to reiterate, the main point that we're stressing here is the fact that we've got this conflict between the code and what OSHA is
let me just
saying they're going to follow.
You have beautifully put out what this new, and it's a news release. Let's make sure this is clear. It's a news release that they're telling you that we should follow as businesses in the state of California. Here is the ultimate problem. I can't write your documentation on the basis of a news release. I can't do that. I write this and keep it up to the code that it is. So if you don't keep to the code, the argument is, if you don't keep to the manuals the way they're written, are you going to get cited for that? I have serious doubts that OSHA is going to cite anybody for this weird conflict back and forth. I think all these people that are within the OSHA have reasonability in this area of how nuts it's been. And I am not blaming science or any political party. I'm saying OSHA, the COVID problem has been an ongoing lesson that we're learning at a time. And I have a lot of empathy for a lot of people who are trying to help us, keep us safe. And they go, all right, I told you 14, it only has to be 10. It's still too long. Let's go to 5. I'm not saying it has to be one and done. I mean, there is a learning process with everything, and science is always learning. But I am saying this: if we're going to write a code, let's talk to the legislature board and say, hey, listen, we're about to do this. Does the California Department of Health have any recommendations? I don't understand why we didn't do it. But with that being said, we're here. It's a short-term problem, but understand what you choose to do. And I want to make this clear. This is your choice, which one you follow. Just know your books are written to code. In a hearing, I can only represent code. If you choose to do the press release, I believe there may be an argument, but I have no basis on it because I've never seen this case before. And we've been doing this for 30 years, our company. So we know what we're doing. But I'm telling you, on this one, this is so crazy that I just go, maybe it's not that big of a problem. Maybe OSHA is going to tone down the people getting cited for this over the next couple of months, and it's not going to be a couple problems. Because, 14th of April, we're going to pop this thing, and I probably will be here on camera with Rick again talking about another one they're putting in place when we know more. But this new variant, I hear, and I'm not a scientist, I hear is not as deadly. And so for that, I am grateful. Let me just say, through this whole COVID thing, it's been nuts. I know some of us are ready to throw our hands up and say, screw it, I don't even care anymore. Just know I really believe we're making progress with this. And If you need some sort of customized training or you want something about this, you know we're here for you. Give us a call. It's part of your service fees already. We don't charge extra for this. We're here to help. Am I right, Rick? We're here to help.
That's it. And the main thing, like Michael said, is the fact that we can help when it comes to the OSHA code. This is a short term. They're either going to have to update their code to what they want it to be, or it'll be over. And we recommend it's probably obviously you want to get your employees back to work as quick as you can, but
I do.
For the short term, it might just be easier to stick to the letter of the law.
Yep. In fact, it's given us more gray hair, Rick. I think I got a couple more strands in my beard. This is getting crazy. Hey, we appreciate you guys watching today. We're going to sign off. I'm Michael Crowley, and this is Rick Roman. And if you guys need anything, give us a call. We're always here.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
If you like this video, please follow us on social media for OSHA updates, free safety webinars, reminders on safety tips, tricks, techniques, and more. What are you waiting for? Like, follow, or subscribe today. Remember to stay safe out there.